Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the intricate and, frankly, fascinating government structure of Pakistan. It's a blueprint that was designed from day one to manage some incredible diversity.
The whole story of Pakistan's government really kicks off with this massive question. How do you possibly forge a single nation from peoples who are so different, each with its own unique language, its own culture, its own history?
Well, the answer they landed on was a federal system. You got to think of it like a carefully designed blueprint for a house that needed to be strong and unified, but without tearing down the very unique rooms that make it special.
All right, so let's crack open this blueprint together. First, we'll look at why federalism was the answer. Then, we'll walk through the three main levels of government. And finally, we'll get into the delicate balancing act that keeps this whole thing standing.
Okay, so first things first. Let's really get to the heart of the problem this whole blueprint was designed to solve. Why exactly was a federal system seen as pretty much the only way to go?
Well, it's because Pakistan, at its core, is a nation of nations. Seriously, trying to force a single, one-size-fits-all government on these incredibly distinct cultural groups, it just wasn't gonna work. Each region needed its own space to breathe, to keep its heritage alive.
And to manage all this, the founders went with a federal system. What that really means is that the Constitution itself, the rule book for the country, divides power. It gives a big chunk of autonomy to the provinces so they can manage their own local affairs. Everything from education to local law enforcement.
So, we've got the why down. Now let's dig into the how. The whole system is built on three main tiers of power, kind of cascading down from the top.
Think of it like a waterfall of power. It starts right at the top, with the federal government, which sets the big-picture national agenda. Then, that power flows down to the four provincial governments, and from there, it drills all the way down to the local grassroots level.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We've all heard of the separation of powers, right? An executive branch to enforce laws, a legislative branch to make them, and a judiciary to interpret them. But the really crucial thing to get here is that this isn't just for the big national government. Nope. This exact same setup is basically copied and pasted down at the provincial level, too. It's like a built-in system of checks and balances running in parallel across the country.
All right, let's zoom in on that top tier. Let's pop the hood on the national government, the federal engine room, and see how it actually works. Who's really in charge?
At the very top, you've got two main players. There's the president, who is the ceremonial head of state, a symbolic figure for the whole nation. But the real day-to-day executive power, the person actually running the country, that's the prime minister.
So who actually makes the national laws? Well, that job belongs to Pakistan's parliament. And it's not just one giant room full of people. It's a bicameral system, which is just a fancy way of saying it has two separate houses, and each one has a very different job.
First up, you've got the National Assembly. You can think of this as the House of the People. It has 336 members who are directly elected, and the key thing here is that representation is all about population. The more people living in an area, the more seats it gets. Simple as that.
But then you have the Senate, the upper house, and this is where the design gets really clever. The Senate is the voice of the provinces, and here's the kicker. Every single province, it doesn't matter how big or small, gets the exact same number of seats. This is absolutely critical because it means a smaller province has the same institutional clout here as a massive one.
Okay, let's move one level down the ladder and see how this whole federal idea is basically mirrored at the regional or provincial level.
And right away, you're going to notice a familiar pattern. Each province basically runs a mini version of the federal government. They've got their own executive branch, their own legislature to make provincial laws, and their own court system. It really is a parallel system of governing, and it's all designed to give each region real control over its own affairs.
And that parallel structure, it continues right up to the leadership. Each province has a governor who's the ceremonial head, kind of like the president. And then there's the chief minister who holds the real executive power, just like the prime minister does at the national level. See the pattern?
And of course, each province has its own assembly to pass laws on local issues. Let's take the Punjab Assembly. It's got 371 seats in total. But look closer. It's not just a free-for-all. You see, seats are specifically set aside for women and for minorities. This is to make absolutely sure that different groups are represented when provincial laws are being made.
All right, time to drill all the way down to the third and final tier of government, the one that's supposed to be closest to the people. The big idea here is what's called devolution.
basically pushing power as far down as possible. So, local problems, like fixing a neighborhood school or dealing with sanitation, can be solved by elected local leaders who actually live there. But, and this is a big but, while that's the blueprint, the reality on the ground has been a bit messy. The actual power of local governments has been pretty inconsistent over the years.
So we have these three layers: federal, provincial, and local. But here's the thing. This whole complex system isn't just set in stone. It's more like a living thing, constantly in a state of negotiation, a perpetual balancing act between the central government and the regions.
And this quote right here, it absolutely nails the central tension of the whole system. How much power do you give the provinces so they feel truly in charge of their own destiny without weakening the unity of the entire country? It's this constant, delicate political tightrope walk.
So how do you actually manage this tightrope walk? Well, you can't just hope for the best. There are specific bodies designed to be referees. For instance, if there's a dispute over water rights between provinces, they can go to the Council of Common Interests. If they need to get on the same page about money, there's the National Economic Council. Think of these as the official negotiating tables, where everyone comes together to hash things out.
And so this really is the fundamental question for Pakistan's future. The entire system was designed to hold together a nation of nations. But as the world changes and pressures build, the ultimate test is whether this incredible, intricate blueprint can bend without breaking and continue to perfectly balance the power of its many parts with the unity of the whole.